Good morning, folks. Valentina here with Wisdom of the Tea Leaves. And I'm sitting here this morning musing myself over a cup of tea, considering some things that I watched and read in the last few days and kind of put me in a space where I'm exploring these different ideas and being curious about different things. My attention is sort of focused in that realm. And that's the realm of self-deception. And on top of that, the realm of self-esteem and self-worth, and how the two are actually related. So a couple of days ago, I posted a TED Talk on my wall on Facebook by Courtney Warren, a psychologist from University of Las Vegas. And her whole point was, she also has a book out, you can probably find it on Amazon. The whole point was how we live in a world of self-deception because we don't have the emotional fortitude, the emotional strength to see things as they are and act accordingly. And there are costs to this. There's the short-term benefit that we make ourselves feel a little better by telling ourselves little lies in our head about who we are, how we are, what we love, what we don't love, all that stuff. But there's a long-term cost, which is we're not living an authentic life and we're suffering. And not only are we causing ourselves suffering, but we're causing other people suffering because of the multitude of misunderstandings that happen when we're operating out of this unauthentic space, when we're not willing to accept who we are as we are. And we're trying to be someone else out there and trying to cope by self-deceiving and by denial. So it's an interesting talk. If you get a chance, head over to my Facebook page or shoot me a message and I will send you the link. And then at the same time, I've been kind of exploring the space of self-worth and self-esteem. So I saw this research that was done and on people and social status, and how some people would rather have a platinum, and a lot of people, I would say like a huge percentage of the population would rather have a platinum credit card because it's a symbol of status, even though that particular credit card is more expensive to have and it offers less benefits than competitors that are not so flashy like a platinum card. So how much importance do we put on objects in our lives that are communicating to others the kind of image we want them to have for us? So our cars, houses, clothes, cards, whatever you want to look at, our interactions with others, social media. When you're looking at social media, people living perfect lives, right? They're eating wonderful dishes, going on wonderful vacations, having perfect relationships, always smiling and all that stuff. So we're putting a lot of effort into creating a social image. And so the conclusion was that social image is a substitute to self-esteem. It seems to be the easier path to self-gratification and a sense of worth is to have other people mirror at you, like your pictures, comment on your posts and tell you how wonderful you are, than you actually doing the work on the inside to make yourself feel good just by who you are, not because somebody else is telling you that you're awesome. So self-worth makes you independent of others and makes you self-sufficient, and it grounds you, so you're able to be more authentic with other people. You can even be vulnerable with other people and just really be who you are, therefore forging more meaningful and deeper connections with others without unnecessary misunderstandings, because people will sign up to be with you based on what they're seeing. And then when they realize that you are not what they're seeing, both of you are sitting in a conflict and no one wants to be there. So we end up having these social identities that have very little to do with who we actually are. And so we're building our lives around building these social identities and how we want people to see us, rather than spending the time to really become the person we want to become. In that process, we have some issues. So like, how does self-deception relate to this kind of a attitude of having a social image without having substance? Essentially, that social image becomes the lie we tell ourselves about ourselves. So we continue to perpetuate it. But also, what it means is that we never actually make ourselves fully available to anyone, deeply available to anyone, because there's always the fear that they'll find out who we really are. And how we're going to hide that. Like, it's easy to look one way on Facebook, and it's a whole nother ball game when you're face to face with a person and they can see how you think and how you treat others and how you talk and all that stuff. I have known people that are very positive on Facebook, always posting on Instagram positive images, positive psychology, pop psychology shit, you know, left and right. So you get the idea that they're upbeat and happy, and when you spend 15 minutes with them, it's like, it bogs you down. They're so negative, they're critical, they're angry, they're always criticizing this, that, and it's somebody else's fault. And you just like 15, 20 minutes, and I'm like, all right, I gotta get out of here. I'll just look at your pictures on Facebook because that's a lot better. So self-deceit, it intrigued me. That concept intrigued me because in a way it's an adaptation for the discomfort of life. So it's like Courtney was saying, it is much more challenging to look at ourselves with a critical thinking capacity and sort of examine our behavior and examine our beliefs and motivations for doing things, and admitting to ourselves that we're not as altruistic as we'd like to think, we're not as good and wonderful and friendly as I would like to think. You know, to see our own selfishness, to see our own fears, to see our own confusion. It's scary to people, but I'm one of those folks, like if I read something and intrigues me, if I see something and intrigues me, I want to know how's that related to me, and am I doing it, and how am I doing it, and can I do better? So I sit down, like yesterday, I finally, like I've been thinking about this for a while. It's like, which way and how am I really deceiving myself? It's like, where are my blind zones, and what am I in denial of that's really affecting my life, my work, perhaps my choices, my relationships? Like, you know, these things come up, right? So in the spirit of evolution and progress and having a better day tomorrow than I'm having today, I sit down like the geek that I usually am, and I start thinking about this shit, and I get my notebook and my pen, and I just go stream of consciousness. Because, like, by definition, the things you're self-deceiving yourself about are not gonna just pop up and say, hey, here's me, check me out. No, like, you have to kind of go under your layers of conditioned responses and under the layers of lies you've been telling yourself over the years, and sort of look at your behavior and look how other people perceive you, and then impose on that the way you feel, the way you actually feel. And you're looking for these places of incongruency, and you're looking for places of friction. So one of the great places to go is emotional states. It's like, when do I feel upset? When do I feel angry? When I'm ticked off? Like, under what circumstances is this happening? And then start there. It's like those emotional states, negative emotional states, are really signs that there's friction between your map of reality, your idea of who you are or who you're trying to be, with how things actually are. So facts versus feelings. Feelings are not thoughts. Feelings are not facts either. So look at the facts, look at the feelings, see what your thoughts are in relationship to the facts, and how that's creating the feelings. And then you have a fertile ground to start from. So here's me, stream of consciousness, just sitting there writing. I think I wrote like 3 or 4 pages like a big notebook. And it's like, oh my God, look at me, look at me. Like it was, first of all, it was liberating because I was like, it's almost like finally like a 12-step program. The first step is, I got to get over denial. So like acceptance. So once you're able to tell yourself, like once you're able to stand up and admit to yourself, this is how I really am, that's liberating because you realize, okay, well, I can work with that. I can work with that. I can do better. I can fix this, or I can accept this. It's not so bad. Check this out. What am I worried about, right? So that's what I did. So I like listed out all the things I thought that I'm deceiving myself about, like those places of incongruency, and it appears that I need another degree in psychology. No, I'm just kidding. But definitely work in progress. And Courtney Warren, that's one of her points, is like, she says, as you become aware of certain things and you work on them and you transcend them, guess what? Life gives you other opportunities to find out more about yourself. So you're constantly having to make the choice of A, being honest with yourself, or B, telling yourself a story that's not matching facts and reality. So you always have a choice. But then, depending which side you take, if you take the side of objectivity and honesty, then the choices for the future actions that come from that stance are actually more satisfying to you, more productive, take you further, help you grow, brings you to more meaningful experiences and relationships, versus if you take the stand of taking yourself telling yourself a story that sounds better than reality. You're, in other words, deceiving yourself. Then you're making choices of that deceptive place, and the choices you're making are likely to be the kinds of choices that continue to support the deception. And then you're fucking stuck because you're never going to feel comfortable. It's always going to be a little friction, a little guarding. You're never going to be able to be vulnerable. You're never going to be able to get fully closely to anyone. And it's a lot of work, and you're always going to be dependent on other people to validate you and like your pictures on Facebook so you can feel good about yourself. So self-deception and self-esteem go hand in hand. And in a kind of a negatively reinforcing patterns, like your self-deception is reinforcing your low self-esteem because you're having to support an idea of yourself, defend your choices, defend your ideas, defend your decisions based on fake information, based on what you're telling yourself versus what actually is. So you cannot ever be fully free, fully happy, fully content if you're not living from a place of honesty. Not to mention the complications that arise because we're not being honest. Maybe you're just not wanting to hurt this person's feelings, so you say something in a certain way, and that opens the door for them to ask more of you or demand more of your time, or they simply go about their business taking at face value what you said, making decisions based on that later you find yourself like, shit, I really don't want to be down this path. How did I get here? Well, you got here by not being honest in first place and leading other people on along the way. So then the whole thing falls apart. The other person is upset, you upset, and I have to fix it. Yeah, blah, 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 blah. It's complicated, right? So, parallel to this tangent, I was also watching this lady who is a sex psychologist for teenagers. She's actually like a coach for teenagers and young adults, millennials, that are confused about sexuality and or more accurately, they're looking for connection, they're looking for meaningful relationships, and end up just having sex and hooking up, and apparently causing them a lot of emotional instability because they can't figure out what's going on and why this, why that. So, they call her up. She's the shrink, she's the coach. And so she said an interesting story. She gave an example with an interesting story about a girl that called her up, one of her clients, and she's like 19. And it's like, hey, how's it going? And the girl says, yeah, everything's fine. Life is beautiful. I've been having a lot of fun. I went to a party. And the shrink says, great. So what happened at the party? How'd you do at the party? And she's like, oh yeah, we got a little drunk. We had a little bit to drink. And this guy really wanted to hook up with me, but I didn't like him. So I said no. And the psychologist says, great, good for you. You stand up for what you actually like or don't like. And the girl says, yeah, I know. Like, I just end up giving him a blowjob. And the psychologist is like, what? You didn't like the guy, so you didn't want to have sex with him or kiss him, but you gave him a blowjob. What? So this is what happens when we're not honest with ourselves. We are trying to maintain an image of a certain kind of person. In this case, this girl wanted to be cool. She didn't want to be judged, like she's not putting out, or she's not friendly, or she's backwards. Like, oh my God, seriously? Like, you're not going to be like your mother right now? So, she's willing to neglect her own boundaries and her own comfort in order to sustain that social image that she has. And that comes from self-deception. It's like, I am this person and therefore I have to defend this image. Versus she could say, I'm this other person and I'm not giving no guy a blowjob if I don't like him. I don't care what he thinks. Right? But that kind of like a side tangent there. I don't know if you guys realize, but it's like generational gaps here. But hooking up is a normal thing these days, sexually permissive culture. But 80% of all hookups are done under the influence of alcohol. And a huge percentage of that is under the influence of 4 or more drinks. So people are actually getting plastered so they can have sex. We're not talking just about liquid courage here. We're really talking about people who are getting plastered so they can have sex, or they end up having sex, intending it or not intending it. And so that kind of raises the question of why is so much drinking necessary for you to have sex with someone. I mean, it's like you can start thinking about this in all sorts of ways, but perhaps it is because you need to be somewhat anesthetized to your own boundaries and to your own standards in order to perform in certain ways that you think you need to perform in order to be accepted, in order to be validated, in order to be valued by others. And that gets scary. Another interesting thing coming out from this sex psychologist lady is how millennials have no other meaningful way of connecting. Like, they are the generation, probably the first generation raised on literally electronic means of connecting. They're the first generation that is most inadequate in face-to-face contact, socially awkward, and they tend to feel as a group, I'm not talking about individuals, but as a group, tend to feel isolated. They can't figure out where they fit. They're angry about this, that, and the other. They're confused. They're illiterate in so many social ways because they're literally connecting electronically more than anything else. So when face-to-face, they don't know what they need to do. The other part of that electronic digital connection is that it's actually not satisfying. Humans need touch. Humans need hugs. Humans need voices and glances, and they need to feel like someone is right next to you. It's what friends used to be like. When I grew up, we'd be tumbling in the weeds, climbing trees, playing, rough housing, whatever. It was like a lot of human contact with all kinds of people. And that generation is the first generation that's the most isolated, I would say. And then, of course, everything after the millennials is even worse. And so for them to get naked means I'm now connected. It's like, you must really like me if we are naked and we're hooking up. but they don't know what to do with it. Like that's as far as they know where to go. And so it becomes a distraction from personal growth, from work, from all kinds of stuff. But it also becomes the only means of connecting, and it's not very satisfying, because if you're just going to hook up, you're only going to go so far in the relationship. It's like physical, and it's a hookup, and it's not that exciting compared to actually building a meaningful relationship. And any sex psychologist out there or sex expert will tell you that the sex gets better the more you do it with someone. Even though the passion might wane like 2-3 years later in long-term relationships, sex is better. Like, people learn about each other more, they can please each other better and all that. So like, hooking up, if that's your means of validating yourself, and that's your means of distracting yourself and sustaining your social image, what is this saying about your self-esteem and self-worth? And how are you able to do this without self-deception? So interesting questions, right? Another area where the self-deception comes in, and like talking about sex again, is okay, my favorite. And I've heard it from more than one guy, okay? I hear it from almost every guy. It's like, oh yeah, I don't have a problem pleasing women. I've never been with a woman that has not had an orgasm while with me. And they're like convinced that every girl they've ever been with has been sexually satisfied with them. And I'm like, I guess you didn't check the statistics. While 78% of the guys during a hookup get an orgasm, between 58 and 75% of the women in a hookup do not get an orgasm. So the chances are, with the last 10 women you've been, Mr. Mojo, the last 10 women you've been with, between 6 and 8 of them faked their orgasm. So you're not as good as you think you are. But it's not your fault, actually, because she has to communicate with you what she wants and what she needs for you to deliver, if you're so willing, right? So it's a together thing. But most women would rather fake an orgasm than expose themselves, and because they feel like if they say something, they will be judged, like there's something wrong with them, and they don't want you to think that there's anything wrong with them. Or B, they don't want to embarrass you, so they're, perpetuating your self-deception. Or C, they just want to get over it, and if they see that you're trying hard to help them, to please them, but they don't know how to communicate to you what works for them and what doesn't, they would just as well fake it and get over it so that they can move on, and you guys can do some other stuff. So deception and self-deception, I mean, this is like really tricky stuff, and it's usually the area of being very uncomfortable, right? Because these are the conversations you don't want to have. You're not sure how to have. But you have to be honest with yourself, and that's the first conversation you start with, is with yourself. Who am I? What do I want? What works for me? What kind of people I want to hang out with? What are my beliefs? Why am I making the choices I'm making? What motivates me to choose this or that? What's behind this decision? You constantly question yourself, and you catch yourself in places of emotional distress to look for the ways you've created a different story, instead of stick to the facts and pay attention to the meaning you're giving those facts, and be objective and be honest with yourself. So anyhow, that's my little spiel for the day. And as a coach, as a friend, as a sexual partner and a girlfriend and all that, it's not easy for anyone. Not easy for me, not easy for my partners, not easy for my clients, not easy for my students, not easy for anyone. But practice makes it easier. It's like the more you commit to honesty, the more you commit to your building your self-esteem and building your own self-worth, the easier it becomes. Your choices become easier. So it gets, you know right away, this is what works for me, this is what doesn't work for me. You don't lead people on. You don't get into situations that, even if they have a short-term pleasurable effect, they have a long-term drama coming up with them. Or whenever you do end up in these situations, you tend to cut them short a lot faster. So this is my little musing from a week or so of exploring in this area, and I'll be happy to work with you if you're trying to sort yourself out and you're conscientious about who you are and how you want to be in life, so you can have the kind of life you actually want to. There is nothing worse than 20 years down the road or 10 years down the road, you go, what the fuck am I doing here? Why did I get this? Like, why did I spend all this time and energy in this direction when I actually don't care about it? Like, what the hell? Now, what are you going to do? So anyway, you can always find me at valentinapetrovaconsulting.com and send me a comment, send me an email, call me, and I'll be happy to talk to you. Take care.